Before we get started, I'd like to share this statement with you. It's from the Berkeley Public Library. The Berkeley Public Library acknowledges that we sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Ohlone peoples. We honor with gratitude the land itself, as well as the Ohlone peoples who still live, work, and play in this region. The Berkeley Public Library condemns all forms of hatred, racism, and other forms of discrimination. We are outraged by and saddened by the surge in hate crimes towards Asian Americans communities, as well as the racism that has been shown towards African American communities. We stand in solidarity with all the marginalized peoples that have been subjected to hatred and intolerance, and we celebrate the differences that contribute to the strength of our community. Everyone is welcome here at the Berkeley Public Library. So thank you. It's a pleasure to begin our program this afternoon. My name is Emma. I'm a librarian at Berkeley Public Library, and together with librarians Armin and Anne, we are happy to introduce you to our special guests, Sean Peterson and Lynn Schofield. Questions can be put questions can be put in the chat or the question and answers, and it's the Q&A, I think. Well, we'll try it out, but definitely can be put in the chat. And we'll get to as many as we can before the end of the program. So to introduce our guests, Sean Peterson is a PhD student from UC Berkeley in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management. And Lynn Schofield is a staff biologist at the Institute for Bird Populations. We invited Lynn and Sean here to be with us today because of their work with the peregrine falcons that nest in Cal Berkeley's campanile, the big clock tower there on campus, and the webcam that many of you have enjoyed viewing for the last few years. We've gotten an up close and personal view at these beautiful and amazing birds. Falcons are raptors, and Lynn and Sean are here to tell us about the raptors that are all around us, and about Annie and Grinnell and the chicks living in the campanile. So thank you, Lynn and Sean, for joining us today. Take it away.
All right, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I actually just a little off the cuff thing just want to do because you did the acknowledgement of our presence on Ohlone land, and as ecologists, really well, and all of us, we owe a lot to the Ohlone people because their relationship with the environment here is what created the natural diversity that we still have today. And so, thanks to the Ohlone people for what we see in the beautiful oak savannas and all the habitat that's here. So just thought I should add that quick off the cuff. And but I will be starting up the presentation here and talk about some raptor basics, and then I'm going to hand it off to my partner Sean here, and he will talk about the Cal Falcons themselves. And so while I have the screen share up, it's hard for me to see the chat or the Q&As. So if one of you needs to butt in and stop me about something, if people are asking a question that should be answered while we're going, feel free to do that. I understand that occasionally there's a question that you just need to back up and answer midway through, but hope we have this all ready to go. Okay. So is screen sharing working? Everybody doing good here? All right, yep. So we're here to talk about our resident raptors. So while we're talking about raptors, we should first ask, what is a raptor? I think a lot of us have kind of an intuitive sense, there's, a kind of bird there. But what really defines a raptor is that they are birds that share adaptations to be meat eaters. And I have down in the corner a couple little helpful definitions, because we don't all know what an adaptation means exactly, but those are features that made them suited to their environment and suited to the lifestyle they live. And so what all of these birds share is that they're suited to being meat eaters. And I just want to take a moment to thank, there's a couple of photographers that have contributed a lot of wonderful images. Walter Katundu is one and John Davis is another. And please forgive me, John, if you're here, I accidentally totally destroyed the image, but the rest of them I think I preserved well, because I want to do justice to how wonderful his photography is. Okay, so what are the adaptations that all these raptors share to find their prey? Prey, of course, being the food that they hunt for. And one of the first things is they all have very sharp vision. And so you can see the beautiful eyes of these different species. And when we say sharp vision, we mean very sharp vision. A raptor can see their prey over a mile away. So to imagine how far a mile is, imagine this, this bird here is an American kestrel, very beautiful. Imagine this American kestrel was standing on the Golden Gate Bridge there, and it was looking around for a mouse to eat. It could see a mouse perched over there at the other tower of the Golden Gate Bridge, or it could look over to where this picture is being taken from and see a mouse there. And that is incredible to imagine that that little bird can see food that far away. The other thing that raptors share is that they have strong feet and talons that they use for catching their prey. And this here is the feet of a golden eagle. A scientist is in the process of banding this bird. And I think Sean will talk a little more about why scientists band birds later in our talk. But you know, how strong are these feet? A great horned owl. And now just so you know, a great horned owl is a big bird, but it still only weighs maybe 1.5 to 2 pounds, maybe 3. You know, so they're a big bird, but not that big. That's smaller than your cat. That's, you know, smaller than your teeny tiny chihuahua. But their grip in their hands is 10 times stronger than the strongest person you know. And that's how they're able to catch their prey. These feet are what really matter for them to be able to catch their food. And then, of course, they have sharp hooked beaks to then eat their prey. And so here we can see a red tail eating a gopher there, using that hooked beak exactly how it is meant to be used. So there's a lot of things that make raptors similar. They have their lifestyle of being predators. They hunt for meat, but there's a lot of things that make the different kinds of raptors very unique. And so just as a quick example, these are two of the raptors that we see in California that are perhaps some of the most different. The American kestrel, the little one with the blue head and dots on its belly. That one's our smallest raptor in California. And in the other side, that is a California condor, and it is our largest raptor. And so the difference in size there is a California condor has a wingspan of 9.5 feet. Well, a kestrel's wingspan is a little under a foot. So, you know, why are these raptors so different? They're both, you know, living a lifestyle where they are eating meat. They share that. They share traits of their eyes and their feet and their beak. But the kinds of worlds they live in are different. They're using different habitats. That kestrel loves open prairies where it can use its wonderful see very far and its mouth prey. And the condor likes desert areas with lots of nooks and crannies in the rocks to build their nests. They have very different diets. They're both eating meat, but kestrels will eat things like mice or even meat as small as the meat from a cricket. And the California condor, on the other hand, what's in that picture there is a whale that washed up on the beach in Daly City. And the meat is gone from that whale, but California condor would have been picking, you know, the meat off of a whale that might have washed up. And then they have very different homes. A kestrel is adapted to live in little holes where they can be safe, whereas the condor is living in those rocks. So they have very different lifestyles, even though they share their sharp vision and their beaks and their feet and their meat-eating ways. And then the other thing that's very interesting, and we're going to go a little bit into this because it's a little bit complicated, but very fascinating. So they all eat meat, but they're not actually all related. So we're going to talk about something called, and this is a big word that we don't need to know, but for fun, taxonomy, which is how we understand how different kinds of animals are related. Because it turns out the raptors aren't all related. So as a quick background, let's think about how a family tree works. And so you can make a tree where you think about your grandma and grandpa and who their kids were. And so their kids would be your mom and your aunts and uncles, perhaps. And then they themselves would have you and maybe your sisters and brothers. And then your aunt and uncle, they have your cousins. And so you can look at this and you know that you and your sister, you guys over here, you're more closely related to each other than your cousins, even though you're all part of a big family. And so you can talk about your family tree and your big family, or you could talk about the family tree of different individual birds. And you can see that, you know, the brother and sister birds are a little more similar than the cousin birds, but they're all part of a big family. So you could talk about individual birds, but you can also talk about whole species of birds and how all the species and families fit together. So this family tree has a lot more different things on it. And that is why they had to bend it into a circle so it all fit in a single picture. But instead of grandma and grandpa, right here at the beginning, what you have is dinosaurs with feathers. That were how birds originally started. And then all of these brothers and sisters and cousins of the different kinds of birds. It turns out that the falcons are cousins with parakeets, and the vultures are cousins with eagles, and then owls are cousins with mouse birds. So if you're curious then, that means over on the left here, this owl, oh, hang on, there we go. This big owl is actually the sibling of this tiny little mouse bird with its fluffy little crest. The vulture and the hawk, those two siblings, and then that parrot and the falcon on the right-hand side of the screen, those guys are siblings. And the owl and the hawk and the falcon, they are not each other's closest relatives. So they all share similar adaptations because they all are meat eaters, but they're not all related. And so let's talk about the things that are making these big whole families and groups similar. Now, falcons, they're amazing because what they're adapted for is speed. They have these very points that helps them get incredibly fast. They have eyes that are designed that they close. They have a third eyelid that closes that keeps their eyes protected while they're in these steep dives. And they even have an adaptation in the top of their bill that helps close up their nose while they're flying so fast. Because when I say they're adapted for speed, I mean they're adapted to dive at over 240 miles per hour. And we say over 240 because that's as far as anyone's been able to measure, because that's as far as we can get a plane to follow these falcons to go. So it's something over that number, but we don't quite know how fast. They are incredible. Now, on the other hand, the hawks, and as I said, these hawks are not really so closely related to falcons. They just share their meat-eating lifestyles. So the hawks, and this group called the bootios, which are the soaring hawks, they are known for having big, wide wings. These are a group of birds that are adapted for flying long distances very efficiently without using very much energy at all. And to give you an example, an eagle can fly over 100 miles on those big, efficient, broad wings without flapping at all. They're just gliding. So to imagine how far is 100 miles, It would mean that this eagle could start in Berkeley and fly all the way to Monterey without one flap if it wanted to. What they'll do instead of flapping is they look for air currents that are perfect for them to catch with their big wings. And now, another kind of hawk is the accipiter. And so that's the big word for forest raptors. And what they are designed for is maneuverability. So whereas these eagles and bootios and soaring hawks, they're in open sky, and we have these pictures of them just flying, nothing in the background. The accipiters, what they're living in is dense forest. So they're designed to be very maneuverable. They have short wings and a long tail that helps them navigate through places like this. This is a sharp-shinned hawk. I actually took the picture in Puerto Rico, but it's a species we find around here, and that's the habitat it was in. It was flying through those dense trees hunting, and that takes a lot of ability to turn and move and navigate very quickly. And so then the other kind of raptor we see a lot of is owls. And I think people know owls pretty, we know owls pretty closely, and they are adapted for stealth. So when they're hunting silently, and they're hunting at night. So that's the vocab word here is nocturnal. That means an animal that is active at nighttime. And so, for example, though, a barn owl can hunt in complete darkness. Now, they have incredible eyes. Here's a picture of a great horned owl, and it's absolutely amazing and huge eyes. They can pick up just the tiniest amounts of light. They can see an animal, a prey item, moving in very tiny, just in almost no light. But what they also have is not just the large eyes. They also have these incredible large ears. And something you'll notice about that skull that shows those big, huge, there's the big, huge holes for the eyes, and then the big, huge hole for the ears behind those. You'll notice that those are not actually centered like ours are. One's higher than the other. And that actually is kind of a neat adaptation because it helps them. It takes a little longer for sound to get from one side to the other, and it helps them tell exactly where that tiny little sound of the tiny little prey item they're looking for is hiding. So they have great eyes, but they don't even need any light at all. They can catch their food just with hearing if they need to. And then, of course, not only are they able to see the prey, they also want to be sure that their food isn't able to hear them coming in the dark. And so they have special feathers that are extra soft, and that means they can fly extra silently and sneak up on what they want to eat. So we have two feathers here, very close-up pictures of the feathers at the right at the edge. You'll see that owl feather has a very fuzzy edge there, and that makes it so when it flaps through the air, it muffles the sound. Whereas that other hawk feather has a very stiff edge, so when it flaps, it's loud because that other kind of hawk doesn't need to be quiet in the way that an owl does. And now the next group of raptors is the vultures, and they are adapted to eat dead animals. Our vocab word here is carrion. That's the meat from dead animals. So these are carrion eaters. And for one of their adaptations for their lifestyle as a carrion eater is they can smell carrion. They can smell the dead animal that they want to eat from 15 miles away. And that would mean that a vulture hanging out here in Berkeley would be able to smell something rotting all the way over by Ocean Beach. Maybe that whale that washed up that I had a picture of before. So those are the groups of raptors that we see a lot of. But what raptors specifically can you find in your backyard? And when I say in your backyard, I really mean in your backyard. Raptors are all around us in the city. They're in the wild, they're in the mountains, they're in the forest, they are everywhere. They are a part of ecosystems worldwide. And we're really lucky that they have been able to adapt to cities and be something we can see. So one of the first ones, I talked about this group of birds called the bootios, the soaring hawks. This might be one of the most common hawks that you will see around your neighborhood and around California. It is the red-tailed hawk. And it's a sound that might be familiar to you. I'm going to play the call of the red-tailed hawk here. Hopefully that works. So that is the sound of a red-tailed hawk, pretty fierce. And now what the characteristic that most people obviously find striking about the red-tailed hawk is that beautiful red tail, which you can see on the individual on the right. That is a fully, and it uses that tail to show off how very healthy it is. But on the left is a young red-tailed hawk. It's just in its very feathers. They grow a new set of feathers every year, but the very first set of feathers they grow when they leave the nest does not have that red tail yet. So it makes it a little harder to tell what a red-tailed hawk is because you don't always see that red tail. But what you can see is the shape of their wings and the shape of their face and the way that they fly. And what makes red-tailed hawks even more confusing is that they come in a bunch of different colors. There are light red-tailed hawks. There are dark red-tailed hawks that are almost entirely black or brown. And you can see red-tailed hawks of all colors, from almost totally white to almost totally black and everything in between here in California. And the difference, we actually don't necessarily know why there's a difference, and perhaps, you know, it's just like people, that there's just different birds, and you know, that diversity is what really makes this species super interesting. So it makes it a little difficult when you're bird watching around town, but if you see a big hawk soaring overhead that is not flapping very much, it's flying very comfortably, that is probably the red-tailed hawk you're seeing. And then listen for that fierce cry that they do, and that will help you know you have a red-tailed hawk. So the other bootio that we'll see in Berkeley and all over California is the red-shouldered hawk. And you can see from this picture they have red shoulders, but they also have red belly, red legs, a little bit red on their neck. So I don't know if it's necessarily the best word to describe them, but here's kind of a close-up front and back of the red-shouldered hawk. You can see that they are really a very beautiful bird. They have the black and white stripes and checkered patterns on their tail and wings and back, and the beautiful red tummy. And they have another sound too that I hear a lot when I'm at the parks. I hear it actually quite a lot on campus, even more than I hear the peregrine falcons even. Let's see, do we hear that? Yeah, so if you listen around the neighborhood, you might realize that you hear that quite a bit, and that is the red-shouldered hawk. And then this group that I mentioned before, the accipiters, the forest hawks that are designed for maneuverability. We have two kinds of those in the Bay Area around Berkeley and around California, one of which being the Cooper's hawk. And just like the red-tailed hawk, the adults and the young ones are a little bit different. This one here, the Muni bus, is a full adult, so it has these red barring on its chest, and then a gray head and a gray back. And then the juvenile, which you can see on the left side in this slide, has brown streaky belly and a brown head and a brown back. And here you get the juvenile and the adult Cooper's hawk side by side. And so you can see that there's a really big change in color, but you can kind of identify, you see that really long tail. They also have really long legs. But then, as I said, there are two kinds of accipiters, two kinds of forest hawks that are able to navigate through super dense forest. And the other one is the sharp-shinned hawk, which now might seem a little bit confusing because the young sharp-shinned hawk is a brown hawk with a streaky chest. The one it grows up to be an adult is a hawk with a gray back and a red belly and legs. And so it seems like there's a lot of similarities there. We got a streaky brown bird that grows up to be a bird with a red tummy and black back. So how do you tell these two apart? And it's a little bit tricky, but what you don't see between these two pictures necessarily is that they are very different sizes. And I didn't want to include too many pictures of birds being held here. These are both birds that are being held by scientists that are taking weights and measurements and some genetic samples and putting bands onto the birds. But having, this human for size here helps really illustrate that the Cooper's hawk, it is a forest hawk. It eats mostly birds. That's why it's so maneuverable, but it eats big birds. Whereas the sharp-shinned hawk is a much smaller species, and it does the same thing. It chases birds around in very dense forests, but it is little. It's eating tiny little birds like warblers, whereas that Cooper's hawk is looking for much bigger prey. And so here they are in flight, and you can also see that there's just kind of a difference in shape. Their faces are a little bit different. What's kind of interesting about the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk is the Cooper's hawk is able to raise these feathers on the back of its head, and a sharp-shinned hawk can't do that. So if you see a forest hawk like this raising the feathers on the back of its head, calling at you, you know that one's the Cooper's hawk. And then owls of the Bay Area, you might recognize these guys. This is the great horned owl, and I'm going to play for you the great horned owl noise. This is probably one of the most recognizable owl sounds because it is the classic hoot owl sound. Which that, brings for me wonderful memories of camping as a child. I don't know about you guys, but the great horned owls, they have the big, beautiful yellow eyes, and they have these ear tufts, which are not their ears. Those are just used to communicate to other owls a little bit mood. It also helps to make it when they're trying to hide back, if you see the one on the right there, it's perched on a tree that has kind of fuzzy branches. Well, those little ears help to kind of blend its silhouette in. And then one thing notable about great horned owls is a lot like red-tailed hawks. And these two pictures don't show it super well, but they also range in colors from very light, like this bird on the left is pretty light for a great horned owl, although they can get much lighter. And they can range to very, very dark. And that's just how the species is. You can find the light and dark birds in the same places. You can find light and dark birds across California. And it's just kind of a neat feature of the great horned owl. And then the other owl that you'll see a lot of in the Bay Area is the barn owl. And so the great horned owl, that hoots like an owl, like you'd expect an owl to, but what's people forget is not all owls hoot. This is what a barn owl sounds like. So they are not a hoot owl, they are a hissing owl. But they're so the difference, you can see a lot of differences between the barn owl and the great horned owl. But a couple important differences between the two. For one, of course, it doesn't have the little fluff. But one is the great horned owl. It likes to hunt more by sight. It likes to take every little bit of light that's around in the darkness, the moonlight, and use that to find their prey. So they have these huge eyes. Whereas the barn owl, they also have incredible vision. They're even better at hearing, and they like to listen for their prey. And so they have big ears. They're behind their fluffy feathers, so you don't see them, but they have those big ears like we showed in a picture of the skull. And then they have this circle around their face. That actually helps to kind of get all the sound waves reflected right towards their ears so they can hear very, very clearly. And barn owls are sort of a species that's very special because they have for a pretty long time had a relationship with people because they do like to roost and nest in buildings. In that picture on the left, those are actually barn owls nesting in the Palace of Fine Arts of all places. The other is in a barn, but you can also build houses for barn owls, and there are parks all around the Bay Area where they've put in barn owl houses so they can nest. And what people will do is actually build barn owl houses instead of as a way to get rid of things like mice and rats that they don't want in their property. And then the last very common raptor you're going to find around the Bay Area is the turkey vulture. And so they are adapted, as I said, for eating carrion. So they have a wonderful sense of smell. You can see in this picture that the nostrils are huge because it's to get all of the smell into their nose and to be able to smell that and figure out where their food is going to be. And then they also have that naked head because what they eat can get very messy. So those are kind of your Bay Area raptors and what you're most likely to see around your neighborhood. Oh, I almost forgot the white-tailed kite. And they are wonderful. They're adapted for soaring. You can see them in open areas. You'll see them hovering, and that's actually one of the best ways to identify them is that they will very beautifully just hover right over a field. It's almost sort of magical looking, but they also are, the only raptor around here that is just white like this, and they just have the two black patches on either wing. And so they are a wonderful bird. And so these two pictures by the photographer, John Davis, he just wanted me to mention when I showed you these pictures of white-tailed kites. And these guys are nesting right at Cesar Chavez Park, I believe. Well, at least when these pictures were taken. I'm not sure if those birds are there now. But so there's the white-tailed kite bringing a rat to its babies, and look how excited those babies are. And he just wanted to remind us when he showed me this picture that, so that rat, maybe it was a perfectly healthy rat that it chased down, but maybe it was a rat that got poisoned because, rats can be a problem and people will try to put poison out to get rid of them. And sometimes it's easier for a bird to catch a rat that got poisoned because it's not moving very fast. Well, and if that rat got poisoned, that means that whole family of kites might be eating poison too. So he just wanted to, put this in there and remind people that it is important to know that there are different ways to take care of pests and to think about what ways people use. And again, barn owls could be one of those ways. All right, so that covers kind of our most common neighborhood raptors, except I almost forgot to get to one because we're going to talk a lot about this last one is the peregrine falcon as our one of our special neighborhood raptors. And so I'm going to hand this talk off to my partner here, Sean Peterson, and he'll tell you all about peregrine falcons and a family of peregrine falcons right in our backyard.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn. That was really awesome. Yeah, I'm going to be covering one of our favorite raptors, the peregrine falcon. So like Lynn mentioned early on, the peregrine falcon is the fastest animal on the planet. They dive somewhere north of 240 miles per hour to hunt their prey. And they're just an incredible species, and one of which was almost gone. When in the late 1970s, there were only 2 peregrine falcons in California. And it was only through a lot of really hard work by scientists that this species was brought back from really almost entirely being gone. And now they've recovered incredibly well. And one of the places that they've come back to is cities. So they're actually one of the more common city raptors now. They have found that tall buildings are great places to have nests, and that there's a lot of food for them, like pigeons or other birds. So specifically, I'm going to be talking about the pair of peregrines that nest on top of the clock tower at UC Berkeley. So there are two falcon adults there. The first is Annie. She is the female. She's about 7 years old. We're not sure how old she is for sure. She does not have any bands on her legs, but she was named after the famous biologist and paleontologist Annie Alexander, who founded the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley and the Museum of Paleontology at UC Berkeley. So she was an amazing woman, and it's really, I think, a fitting tribute to her to name this the falcon after her. And then the other one, the other adult is Grinnell. Grinnell, we know, is exactly 7 years old because when he was a juvenile bird, he had bands put on his legs. And for birds, getting banded is the same thing as getting a driver's license or something. It is basically giving a unique name to that bird that we know exactly who that is, no matter where they are. So Grinnell has a metal band around his leg that has a 9-digit unique number, and he's the only bird in the world that has that number. And Grinnell was named after the biologist Joseph Grinnell, who did some amazing work cataloging all of the plants or animals in California 100 years ago. And his goal was to provide a record of what the animal life looked like 100 years ago for scientists like us today, so we would know how things have changed. Now, one of the most common questions that we get is, how do you tell Annie and Grinnell apart? So there's a few things that we can use. The first is that Annie is a lot bigger. She's about 50% larger than Grinnell. So she is a very, very much larger bird than Grinnell is. Grinnell, if you look at the skin around the eyes and the beak and then the legs, has much brighter yellow skin compared with Annie. And then also if you look at the chest, Grinnell has much fewer stripes than Annie. Annie has a lot more stripes on her chest. And then Annie also has a darker gray back. You can see in this bottom photo. This is Annie on the right. She has a darker gray back than Grinnell, who has a little bit of a lighter back. And then one of the easiest ways to identify which is to look at the legs. And if it has bands, it's Grinnell. And if it doesn't, it's Annie. So we're going to go play some of the some clips. Actually, I think I apologize. I need to make sure the sound is being shared correctly. 1 second. Okay, it is sharing the sound correctly. All right, we're back. So we're going to look at some clips of falcon life on top of the campanile. So the first step is courtship. So in this clip, we're going to see Grinnell and Annie performing a head bow display, which is courtship behavior for when they set up the territory. And this is just kind of them saying, you know, getting to know each other and saying that they want to be a pair, and showing that they kind of have that, that they want that relationship. And then once they've established a territory, they need to defend it from other intruders. So the Bay Area, we're actually lucky to have a lot of peregrine falcons here. And so that means there's competition for territories. So sometimes Annie and Grinnell need to scare away any other individuals who may be looking to take the nest. In this case, it was a young female falcon who wanted to see if she could take the nest. But Grinnell was there to chase her off.
Falcons are a lot louder than you, Sean.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You might want to moderate the sound.
Okay. I might just mute it. I don't think we need sound from here on.
Luckily, eggs are pretty quiet.
Eggs are very quiet. So once they set up a nest in territory, they lay eggs. And so peregrine falcons usually lay 4 eggs, sometimes up to 5. And they're this bright red color, which is really cool. I was really surprised to learn that when I first saw eggs, peregrine falcon eggs. But they're laid right on the gravel in the nest, which is similar to the natural nest, which is usually a cliff face. And then after they lay the eggs, they have to sit on those eggs and incubate them, keep them warm. Bird eggs need to be maintained at a very specific temperature to develop. So that means that for for about a month, Annie and Grinnell are just sitting on those eggs all day, every day to make sure they're nice and warm. And then, of course, after about a month, we get to see them hatch. And so when chicks hatch, they are cutting open the egg with a little bump on their beak called an egg tooth, which is not a real tooth, but a little piece of their beak. And they kind of cut out, a little hole in the egg and then kind of squeak their way out, sometimes with their parents' help. And then
Yeah,
the
you
chicks,
can actually see in that last chick, Annie was helping the chick out of the eggshell a little bit.
Yeah. And then the chicks start to get older. And this is, I think, one of our most popular clips this year is they start to show a little bit of attitude and maybe sometimes accidentally poop on their parents every once in a while. But they start to kind of grow these downy feathers, which are nice, fluffy feathers that keep them warm. And here comes the fun part. Oh, poor Annie. You know, sometimes chicks get a little messy. But as you can see in this stage, they're really getting those downy white feathers in. So they're nice and warm, and they're starting to move around and get bigger. And that's kind of the main goal of the chick, is to get bigger and grow in all their feathers. And then as they get older, they start to grow in more of their adult feathers. Oh, let me turn the volume off on that. They are loud. But they'll get to the point where they're trying to steal the food from their mom and eat it on their own. And they're just kind of acting like unruly teenagers at some points. They are usually always asking for more food, even when they're totally full. But they are all growing in their flight feathers, which are their wing feathers and tail feathers, and then their body feathers, which cover up their down feathers and make them very aerodynamic and let them fly really fast. And as they get older on top of the tower, one of the things we see them do a lot is play around. They'll start chasing moths or other things they find up there and kind of practicing on how to hunt and catch things. So in this case, they found a moth, the chicks found a moth, and they're trying to catch it. But the top of the tower is a really good play area for the chicks. They get to spend all sorts of time practicing with their wings and learning how to flap and strengthening their muscles so that they can fly effectively the first time they fly. Which this is a wonderful video we got from last year's chicks of flying for the first time. So there really isn't any kind of training flight for a peregrine falcon. They start by kind of jumping off the edge of the tower, and that's 300 feet in the air. Oops. Mute that because I think there's a lot of wind in that one. And so you can see here the chick jumps right off the edge of the tower and flies for the first time. And so a lot of these behaviors are totally innate. So they know how to flap, and they are ready to go as soon as they leave the tower. But they have to spend a lot of time strengthening their wings by practicing flapping and running around on top of the tower. And then the last stage is the parents have to teach them how to hunt. And this is one of the hardest things the chicks learn to do is catch their own prey, and the parents work really hard at this. So what will happen is the parent will fly in with a bird or another prey item, and then they'll turn upside down, or the chick will turn upside down and try to grab it from the parent. Or sometimes the parent will drop the prey and the chick will have to try to grab it midair. So this is kind of training them to be able to pursue and catch birds, which are their primary food source. And it's a really amazing time, and can give you some really, truly amazing pictures of this behavior. And then after about 2 months of learning how to hunt with their parents, they have to look for a home of their own. So in this, we're going to tell you about a chick named Larry. And Larry is short for Laurentium, who was one of the 3 chicks in, I think, 2019, maybe 2018. So Larry is a female chick, and she was banded in the nest. She looked like this. And after about 2 months, we didn't see Larry again in Berkeley. We didn't know where she went. She left to go find her own home. And the next time we saw Larry, she had gone all the way over to the Marin Headlands north of San Francisco. And when we caught her there, that's what she looked like. So in 100 days, she went from that little fluffy chick to a really good looking adult or a juvenile peregrine falcon. So it was really amazing luck that we were able to see her again. And it was really fun to see her story. And we kind of figured, oh, maybe that's all we'll see of her. But nope, we actually saw Larry again. So Larry's next step was to move a little bit further to Alcatraz. So she actually lives out on Alcatraz now, and she found a mate. And they have a nest on the west side of the island. And last year was the first year that they had chicks, which made Annie and Grinnell grand falcons for the first time that we know of, which was really exciting. So if you're ever out on Alcatraz, keep an eye on the skies and see if you can find Larry. You might see her out there. And let's see. We're at 3:15 right now. We have a very brief, like, how you can help birds in your neighborhood section, or we could answer questions. Okay, how you can help birds. Maybe I'll hand that back to Lynn. Lynn, you're muted still.
All right, sounds good. I'll share. It's only about 4 more slides, but they're kind of fun slides to know, because I think a lot of people kind of, they connect with these birds. You learn that these birds are in your neighborhood, and that's something really special and really amazing. And people often want to know then how, well, let me move through the slides. How do you help the birds in your neighborhood? How do you start to do things, for the ecology of your neighborhood? And, sometimes as kids, it feels like there's not a lot you can do, but as kids, you might be some of the people who are most able to help, because kids are the ones who really care. And so a couple, things you can do that make a surprisingly big difference. One is to decorate the windows in your house that birds might run into. This is very common that birds will, not be able to see a window and think they can fly through, or see a reflection on the window and think that perhaps that reflection is another bird that's a problem for them and on their territory. So if you do something like decorate your windows, that's actually going to prevent birds from hitting your windows so much. And maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal, birds hitting windows, but it's actually one of the main causes of bird death in cities is hitting windows. And so just being able to do that little step can save so many birds. If everyone did that, it would be incredible.
And we should mention, actually, one of the Cal Falcons chicks, the first year actually died from hitting a window.
Yes.
And
So even
Berkeley,
falcons are susceptible to this.
yeah, and Berkeley went out and put in all sorts of stickers and other sorts of materials to keep windows safe. So it's a good thing to do.
All right. Another thing you can do is, if you're handy, you can build a birdhouse. So as I mentioned, the barn owls, they will live in barn owl houses. If you have a large open area specifically, that's exactly what barn owls like. But you can also build houses for things like songbirds, wrens, and chickadees and bluebirds love birdhouses. And you might think, like, does this, really make a difference if there's one birdhouse in my house? But the fact is, eastern bluebirds, so in the eastern US, we have a different kind of bluebird in California too, and they also were in trouble. But the eastern bluebirds almost were lost from the United States, partially because there were no good places for them to nest anymore. And then a lot of people got together and worked really hard to build lots of these bluebird boxes that they could nest in safely. And the bluebirds came back, and they are no longer a species that we're going to lose. There's something that you can commonly see when you're out east again. And in fact, you can see bluebirds around Berkeley quite a bit, and they will nest in boxes too. I've seen people with boxes in their yard with bluebirds nesting happily. And then another one, this is not just for birds, but for all kinds of species, is plant insect-friendly plants and native plants. Native plants, that means plants that grew wild in your area all through history. And birds are part of an ecosystem of all different animals that live together. And ecosystems start with the plants. Plants are what the bugs eat, and bugs are what the next thing eats. And it's the rodents and the little birds that our raptors are eating. And so planting these insect-friendly and native plants is a way to really help the ecosystem. And I have a little link over in the corner, which is the Alt National Parks. And if you write to them, they will actually send you free packs of seeds for milkweed, which is the plant that monarch butterflies love the most. And that actually, people planting milkweed is one of the ways that monarch butterflies have been doing better. So this can make a difference. This has helped to bring monarch butterflies back to parts of the United States. And then the last one, and I think this one is fun, is you can help scientists and be a scientist yourself by observing the nature in your own neighborhood. Scientists need to know what kind of species are, all over the place. We need to know if something's becoming rare, if there's something we need to help, if changing, if things are growing at different times. Scientists, there's so much we need to know about the plants all around. But scientists often aren't able to start doing work in your neighborhood. They can't do work in your backyard, but you can. And this is a fun little thing. It's an app called iNaturalist. And what you can do is you can take a picture of a plant or an animal or a bug or a butterfly or anything, and it will take that picture, and it has a program that will help show you things that look very much like the picture you've taken, and it'll help you identify what it is. And then it gives that observation to scientists who are studying the plants around you. So you can help science and be a scientist yourself just by using this, and you don't have to be an expert. It will help you learn. So those are some real things that you as a kid could do to make an absolutely huge difference. And then just keep learning about wildlife, because the more people know about wildlife, the better we can, improve our relationships with the, animals and plants around us. And I think that's where we'll leave off, thanks to our partner organizations, UC Berkeley, where our falcon cams are, Institute for Bird Populations I work for, Golden Gate Raptor Observatory, and East Bay Regional Parks. And then a shout out to the photographers who let us use their pictures. Thank you so much, you guys. This is, what made this presentation look as beautiful as it did. And now let's get to questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so well, we did have one question. Someone would like to know if Annie and Grinnell have returned to the campanile every year.
Yeah, they have. We first saw Annie and Grinnell really late in 2016, and they first nested in 2017, and they have not left the campanile since. They they occasionally will kind of spend less time at the campanile, but peregrine falcons in the Bay Area don't really migrate very much, and they kind of stay on territory as much as they can. And the one of the cool things about Annie and Grinnell is that if you want to check them out, you can often see them during the winter on the cams. They'll sometimes be there perched on the tower, just hanging out, waiting for the next season.
Wow, so it sounds like they find a place to, peregrine falcons find a place to live, and then just like that's their home.
Yeah, for the most part, they stick really tight to their territories. They're really they really spend all their time there. The migratory birds, they will fly thousands and thousands and thousands of miles, and then the next winter, or one winter, and then the next spring will come back and end up right in the exact same spot. So yeah, they once they find a spot, they usually try to stay there.
Let's see. So somebody is asking here, what do Annie and Grinnell ever interact with their grown children?
We have not seen that. They what they would probably do is treat them as a rival if they showed up. Their adult children showed up. Once the chicks leave their parents' territory, they're kind of on their own, and it's not they would probably recognize them, but they would treat them as a potential competitor.
Mm-hmm. It's a tough world. And how long do peregrine falcons usually live?
Let's see, Lynn, you might know better than I do.
Yeah, well, Mary was telling us that there are some pairs in the Bay Area that they've had nesting that were almost 20 years old. So they can, in the wild, be 20 years old and still nesting. In captivity, they can get a little bit older. But it's a little hard to tell out in the wild. Life is hard for animals out in the wild, so it's hard to know exactly how long they're able to live, even though, maybe they're only going to make it to about 20 years old in the wild. But I think maybe 30 is kind of the maximum age that people have observed in captivity. Yeah.
And so do other birds ever harass Annie and Grinnell? Like somebody mentioned they've seen crows mobbing red-shouldered hawks, but what about
Yeah, so crows will harass young peregrine falcons, but crows are very unlikely to harass Annie and Grinnell because Annie and Grinnell are very skilled at hunting birds. They're very skilled at hunting other birds. So for a crow, it is a little bit too much risk to be mobbing Annie and Grinnell. Although they might mob a young peregrine falcon as a way to, a peregrine falcon is kind of competitor for a crow, for one, and for two, they just want to make sure that peregrine falcon knows who's in charge, because an adult crow is a lot more savvy than a young peregrine falcon is. But then the red-shouldered hawks, they're not a species that is skilled at hunting something like a crow. Crow's going to be doing that, showing, that the crows know what's going on and that the red-shouldered hawks aren't going to be able to get it and that they don't appreciate that competitor.
It's 3:30 now, and I'm wondering, Sean and Lynn, what kind of time do you have here?
Well, my son is still napping, so I'm still available to talk about birds.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions here. All right. Well, so then what happens if Annie or Grinnell were to pass away? What would happen then to the remaining partner?
So one of the quotes that I've heard a lot from raptor biologists is that peregrine falcons marry the territory, but not the mate. So what is likely to happen, and what has happened in a lot of other nests in the Bay Area, is that if one of the pair dies or leaves, another individual will come in and be the new mate for that territory. So what you see is kind of a cycle of birds where you'd have new individuals coming in. And so hopefully we'll continue to see that. And that's a sign of a good, healthy population of peregrine falcons in the area, that we have those territories continuing on for year after year after year.
And someone has observed a falcon family outside Berkeley Bowl West. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, so that's the second Berkeley pair of peregrines. They have a nest over there, and the chicks fledged about a week ago. I think they flew, and they're doing well. This is the second year that they've been over there. I don't know if we have too many details on those chick birds.
know
They
that-
are not banded, so we don't know where they came from. You have anything, Lynn?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just that we know that this is the second year and those chicks are already out flying in the wild, that they were able to leave the nest successfully and are happy and healthy as far as we know.
That's great. And how fast do young falcons fly?
So young falcons, it takes a little bit of time to really learn to hunt as well as an adult does, but they are very quickly able to fly. Kind of Sean had mentioned, some things are kind of innate that a falcon just sort of knows how to do, and one of those things is flying. And then some things they need to be taught, which is hunting. But I think a young peregrine falcon probably does not take very long to be able to do that 200-mile-per-hour dive. It just takes them a while to learn how to use that dive to the full effect to hunt their prey.
And so let's just go with one more here. Somebody would like a little more information about what you put on your windows to protect birds.
So often what you want to do is have anything that kind of breaks up the reflection of the window. So like a sticker, or sometimes people put streamers or something over the window, but anything that kind of makes it obvious to the bird that there's something there and that it's not a tree or a shrub or another bird. That's kind of the key.
And so you can do fun things like you can, honestly, cut something fun out of construction paper and tape it on the inside of the window, or put up streamers, or, for people, more adult people perhaps, that are less fun, you can also get stickers that look clear to us as humans, but to a bird, I forgot that fun fact, birds can see an entire extra color that humans just can't even see. Entire extra color. But you can get stickers that are in that color that to us just look totally clear, but to a bird looks like there's something there, and so they know not to hit it.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's see. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time now. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Emma.
Well, thank you, Sean and Lynn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and all the people who support the Falcon webcams. I know so many of us have enjoyed watching them over recent years and during the pandemic. Definitely has been a wonderful thing. And thank you for everybody who cares about our resident raptors. So we'll be posting a recording of this video on our website, and then you can check that. You can also check back on our website, which is berkeleypubliclibrary.org, for more Zoom events we'll be having over the summer. And we'll also want you to know that very soon we will start the summer reading game. So this year, the summer reading game is Reading Colors Your World. That's sign up start on June 4th. Everyone is welcome to sign up for all ages, and you get a free book just for signing up. So join us June 4th for signing up. You can do it online. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for
Thank you
coming.
very much for having
joining
us.
Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much for inviting us. This was delightful.
Oh yeah, I love the pictures. I love the information you shared with us. Fantastic.
And yeah, if anyone else in the future has more falcon questions or bird questions or nature questions, you can find us at calfalcons.berkeley.edu, and yeah, drop us a line on social media. We're happy to answer questions, talk falcons.